All right, let's jump right into this deep dive. Today we're looking at all the craziness surrounding Trump's second term.
Oh, yeah.
And we've got like a mountain of sources here. News articles, political analyses, and we even threw in some late night comedy bits just for fun.
Always good.
Yeah. But, one thing that keeps popping up is this whole attack on Social Security. It's kind of wild, honestly. So by the end of this deep dive, you'll be totally in the know. We'll break down what's happening, why it even matters, and what it could mean for like millions of Americans. You ready?
Absolutely. And I think one of the most striking things is how Trump, right from the get-go, is back in like full-on campaign mode. Rallies, fiery speeches, that whole divisive address to Congress. It's pretty different from, what we've seen from other presidents in the past.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely not the like let's all come together vibe you might expect after, such a rough election. So is this like a permanent campaign thing? Is it a strategy? And if it is, like what's the end game here?
It's going to be deliberate, right? Keeping that campaign energy up, the rhetoric, it all keeps his base fired up, engaged. And that sets the stage for, well, his agenda. And it seems like Social Security is a big part of that.
Yeah, and this is where it gets like really interesting because the sources we're looking at, they all highlight this like big lie tactic. And we've seen this before, right? Like back in 2020 with the election.
Oh, absolutely. This big lie thing, it's like straight out of the propaganda playbook. Been around for ages. You just repeat a lie over and over, loud as you can. And eventually, people start to believe it, even if there's no proof. We saw it with the 2020 election denial. And now, boom, it's happening with Social Security.
So hold on, for those who are just tuning in, what exactly are these big lies about Social Security? Can you give us the rundown?
Well, Trump's throwing out all these claims about fraud and waste, saying millions of people who shouldn't be getting benefits are, including folks who are already, deceased. He even throws out these ridiculous examples like millions of beneficiaries supposedly over 100 years old, even one supposedly 360 years old. It's all just meant to get people riled up and make them lose faith in the system.
Okay, so we've got these like totally out there claims, but are people actually buying this? And how's this all tying into cuts for Social Security?
That's the scary part, right? Even though these lies are super easy to debunk, they still gain some traction, especially with people who already distrust the government. So by making it seem like Social Security is this broken system full of fraud, he's laying the groundwork to make huge cuts to the program.
So let's get down to brass tacks here. In his speech to Congress, Trump threw out all these figures, right? Like millions of Social Security recipients, supposedly between 100 and 109 years old, another 3.6 million between 110 and 119, and then the real kicker, that someone's listed as being 360 years old. I mean, come on, is there any truth to these numbers?
None whatsoever. It's all just smoke and mirrors. The Social Security Administration has their own data, and it totally contradicts Trump's claims. If you actually do the math, add up the number of people in each age group and their average benefits, it lines up almost perfectly with the actual Social Security budget. There's simply no way millions of dead people or centenarians are getting benefits. It just doesn't add up.
So it's like he's just throwing out random numbers to scare people and create doubt. Classic tactic. But if it's so easy to debunk, why is it even getting any attention?
That's the real challenge with misinformation,
Right.
right? Especially when it gets amplified by, let's say, certain people. And this is where someone like Elon Musk comes in, and things get even weirder.
Oh, here we go. The Elon Musk connection. I knew this was coming. Now, this is where things get really interesting. So Musk, who has zero experience in government, social programs, any of that, he's suddenly a big player in the Trump administration. He's running this new Department of Government Efficiency. Some people are calling it DOGE, which, I mean, come on. What's the deal with that?
It is strange, isn't it? Musk, the tech guy, not the policy wonk, now has a ton of influence on, well, everything, including Social Security. And what we're seeing is him, basically parroting Trump's rhetoric, which further erodes trust in the system.
Right. He even called Social Security a Ponzi scheme, which is like the go-to phrase for anyone who wants to dismantle the whole thing. It's like they're setting up this self-fulfilling prophecy, label it as failing, and then use that to justify gutting it.
Exactly. That kind of loaded language Ponzi scheme, it plays on people's fears, makes them distrust the system even more, and then suddenly cuts seem like the only option.
So it's not just about spreading misinformation. It's about using that misinformation to push a specific agenda, an agenda that could really hurt millions of Americans. But before we get into those consequences, let's talk about what's actually happening right now. What are the concrete steps being taken to like actually undermine Social Security.
One of the things that's really got me worried is the Social Security Administration itself is already facing some serious cuts. They've had to lay off a bunch of staff and are even talking about closing offices all over the country.
Oh, wow. So this isn't just like empty threats. They're actually taking steps to weaken the very agency that runs Social Security. What does that even mean for, the program as a whole?
It's a huge red flag, honestly.
Mm.
Those kinds of cuts are going to make it so much harder for the SSA to process claims, help beneficiaries, just do their job. It makes you wonder if the program can even survive in the long run.
Yeah, it's not exactly a rosy picture, that's for sure. I bet the Democrats are pretty fired up about this.
Oh, yeah, big time. We're seeing everything from pure outrage and these symbolic walkouts during Trump's speech to more strategic moves trying to fight back with actual facts and data.
So, what are the Democrats saying specifically? How are they pushing back against this whole attack on Social Security?
Well, Hakeem Jeffries, he's the House Democratic leader. He's been super vocal about it, basically accusing Trump and the Republicans of straight up lying to the American people about what they're planning to do with Social Security. He's calling out their proposed cuts, saying they're dangerous and totally unnecessary.
Sounds like he's not mincing words. Are other Democrats on the same page?
Totally. A lot of them are pointing out how hypocritical it is that Republicans are blaming the government for issues they themselves created. Like, take the fact that the U.S. doesn't even have a central death registry. That makes it way harder to stop payments to people who've, passed away, which is something those pushing for cuts always bring up. The Democrats are saying, instead of gutting the whole program, we should be finding solutions to these problems.
It's almost like they're creating the problem on purpose so they can then turn around and use it as an excuse to dismantle the entire system.
You're picking up what I'm putting down. We see this happen all the time in so many different areas. Create a crisis, or at least make it seem like there's a crisis, and then use that to justify these massive changes that ultimately benefit, like, a very small group of people.
This is all starting to feel a little creepy, like something out of a dystopian novel. The way they're twisting the truth and eroding trust in institutions, it's unsettling. If these tactics worked for Trump back in 2020, is there a chance they could pull it off again with Social Security?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Can the big lie work twice? And if it does, what does that mean for Social Security? What does it mean for all the people who depend on it? It's a scary thought.
It is pretty frightening, to be honest, but I'm really glad we're having this conversation, shining a light on all of this. So, for our listeners, what's the main thing they should be taking away from all this?
The biggest takeaway is that we're in the middle of a fight for the truth. Misinformation is everywhere, and people are using it to get what they want politically. And this attack on Social Security is a perfect example of that.
So, it's not enough to just be informed. We have to be super careful about what we believe, really think critically about all the information we're bombarded with every day. But how do we even do that? How do we sort through all the misinformation and propaganda?
It all comes down to healthy skepticism. Don't take everything at face value, especially if it's coming from someone with an agenda. Ask questions. Look for different viewpoints. Check the information against sources, are reliable. Basically, we got to get better at being informed.
So it's not just about what we know, it's about how we think, how we process all this information. It's about developing that critical thinking. But beyond that, what can we actually do to protect Social Security? It's not enough to just debunk the lies. We have to be proactive.
100%. We have to get involved, make our voices heard, and hold our elected officials accountable. Support groups that are fighting to save Social Security. Educate ourselves and other people about why it's so important and what the real challenges are.
It's like you said before, we can't just sit on the sidelines. The future of Social Security and the well-being of millions of Americans depends on us getting involved. We can't just be passive observers.
Exactly. And this is a good time to think about, what we've talked about today, this whole deep dive. It's just a starting point. It's meant to give you the information you need to understand this really complex issue. But this is just the beginning.
So where do we go from here? You've given us a lot to think about, and to be honest, it's kind of overwhelming. What are some specific things our listeners should be asking themselves as they, try to learn more about this?
Well, think about this. If that big lie tactic worked when it came to creating doubt about the 2020 election, is there a chance it could work again with Social Security? What happens if we as a society let this safety net get destroyed because of misinformation and fear-mongering? That's a scary thought.
Those are some really big questions, and I think it's important for all of us to really consider them. What can you do as an individual to make sure your voice is heard and that you're making decisions about Social Security based on facts? Because this isn't just about politics, this is about people's lives.
You're right. It's about getting involved in the political process, holding our leaders accountable, and demanding transparency. Support the organizations that are fighting to protect Social Security. Talk to your friends, family, your community. Don't let misinformation and apathy destroy this program that so many people rely on.
It's a call to action, plain and simple. And I hope our listeners are hearing that loud and clear. Remember, this deep dive was just a quick look at a really complex issue. We've given you the main points, the tools to think critically, and hopefully the motivation to learn more. But there's always more to learn, more perspectives to think about, and more we can all do to make sure Social Security is around for the long haul. Keep asking questions, keep digging, and keep fighting the good fight. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
And on that note, we encourage you to keep learning. The future of Social Security, and honestly, the health of our democracy, depends on informed and engaged citizens like you.
So where do we go from here? I mean, you've given us a lot to think about, and honestly, it's a little overwhelming. What are some specific things our listeners should be asking themselves as they try to, learn more about all this?
Yeah, it's a lot to process. But think about it this way. If using that big lie tactic was effective in sowing all that doubt about the 2020 election results, could it work again, this time with Social Security? I mean, what if we as a society, we let this incredibly important safety net get dismantled just because of misinformation and fear?
Those are some really big questions, and I think it's so crucial for everyone, for all of us as citizens, to really grapple with them. So what can people actually do? What actions can they take to make sure their voices are heard and that they're making decisions about, something as important as Social Security based on solid facts? This isn't just about politics. This is about people's lives.
You're absolutely right. It's about being an active participant, not just a spectator. Get involved in the political process. Hold your elected officials accountable. Demand transparency. Support those organizations that are out there fighting tooth and nail to protect Social Security, and talk about it. Have those conversations with your friends, your family, your community. We can't just sit back and let misinformation and apathy erode this program that so many people rely on.
It's a call to action, plain and simple. And I hope everyone listening is taking that to heart. Remember, this deep dive, it was just a glimpse into this really complex and, constantly evolving issue. We wanted to give you those key takeaways, those tools to think critically, and hopefully the motivation to keep learning and digging. But there's always more to learn, more perspectives to consider, and more to do. Safeguarding the future of Social Security, it's on all of us. So keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep engaging. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Absolutely. And to all our listeners, keep learning, keep asking those tough questions. The future of Social Security, and frankly, the future of our democracy, it depends on informed and engaged citizens like you.